While working with ants at the Exopharm labs, an unnamed scientist suddenly there was a sudden, searing ache in his leg, brought on by the arthritic flare-up. Confused, the scientist thrashes about, and as he topples backward, he hits the tools on his desk, sending them crashing to the floor. Because of this, we are able to ant he was using in his experiments managed to get away. 12-year-old Pell is still struggling to stay alive many months later, pre-high school and middle school. Since he is so uninteresting, he has had enough of everyone ignoring him. Clearly, you can't even spell his name correctly. He'd rather be the center of attention than any other type, yet joked about nerd he feels insignificant and lonely since he has no one to talk to. His crush Amanda's noticed is what he covets beyond all else, yet she has no idea he exists. Pell and her friend are unnoticed by everyone during class photographs. Even the photographer mispronounces his name. Pell's head is cut off in the last group photo, which is taken at the end of the trip, display their lack of concern for him. At a later point in the lesson, the instructor hands out fresh tasks: create a poster on a local celebrity and show it to the class. Illustrations and information on them. Ida, Amanda's sister, observes that there aren't any captivating characters in their rural community, and the instructor reminds her that Mr. Summerstead is the father of the sisters. The best place to begin is with the chief executive officer of Exopharm. This task must be completed in teams of 2. Initially, Pell is under the impression that Amanda wants to invite him to join her as a partner. However, Amanda is just chatting with him. To the female lurking behind, Pell is relaxing by the fire after class, when he witnesses 2 older students mocking Wilhelm for being a geek and like manga, comics, etc. As a kind of aid, Pell throws his apple at the lads, causing them to retreat. If not for a vigilant educator, shouts him out for being on the roof. The lads can now see him through the glass too and start following him throughout the city. Despite his ineptitude, Pell is quicker than them. How much he needs to rest before continuing, and he finds a perfect hiding spot in the garden of a really haunted mansion. A single ant starts its ascent up his leg. The lads think they hear Pell in the garden, based on the sounds they've been hearing, yet they are afraid to go inside since Mrs. Gamelkra, the previous owner, died under unexplained circumstances. Because of the house's history and the rumors that have spread regarding its possible haunting, Pell goes to investigate the home after the lads have left, and that's when the ant creeps up his leg, bites his neck and body. When Pell's dizziness finally overwhelms him, he collapses on the floor. He can make out the form of a figure coming toward him in his peripheral vision. Pell walks by before he can question what's going on. Out. It is late in the day by the time he finally opens his eyes. After Pell gets home, his mother gives him a stern talking to. Mother for returning so tardily, so Pell makes up a story about losing track of time while playing to justify his tardiness. Whenever Pell goes to bed, he has recurring nightmares about ants, and he often awakes in the nighttime to eat a huge meal by stumbling awake to the kitchen. Later that night, Pell doesn't recall what happened and is taken aback to see his bedroom piled high with food containers and leftovers, the stains on his face and lip. After that, he joins his parents for breakfast, who are seeing Mr. Sommersted's interview on the town's flea infestation. Though his mom Pell attempts to sweeten his porridge with milk but discovers they are out of sugar. His hands were unable to free themselves from the box. Only when his father takes it away is he able to let go of it. Then, Pell goes to sip some juice, but he accidentally shatters the glass by lifting it up. Seconds later, in his haste to enter the school, Pell accidentally collides with Wilhelm, assisting him grab his comic book before heading to class, then crash through the door. In Wilhelm's very sight, Wilhelm can't help but stare at Pell for the rest of the physical lesson, particularly when Pell is selected as the class volunteer to conduct the following activity, simply because they were the only ones who didn't put up a hand. Pugil stick sparring is the focus of this workout. Additionally, the educator uses his superior stature to knock Pell to the floor twice in a row. Pell is embarrassed, but he pulls himself together when he realizes Amanda is watching. Reattempts, this time with greater resolve. Pell is able to deftly sidestep and block the instructor's motion, then punch him back hard enough to send him flying across the room. Afraid of what he would do to his own physical form, in Wilhelm's disbelief, Pell flees. Wilhelm tries to help Pell after school by following him home. Convince him to come clean about the situation. He must think Pell is a Superman. While Wilhelm rambles on about superpowers, Pell watches a stranger pull into the driveway, Mrs. Gamelkra's residence, believing he appears familiar but not recognizing him as the form he really is. Observe the sting of the ant. Wilhelm won't stop talking, so Pell borrows the comic book he keeps as a distraction. As Pell abandons Wilhelm, the stranger comes to the door. He then turns to a newspaper story about Mr. Sommerstead and vows vengeance. At the end of the day, Pell studies a snapshot of Amanda, remembering how he had impressed her with his behavior today, and has decided to give Wilhelm's comic a go. After gaining more knowledge about these heroes, He picks up some toys and acts out a scene in which he rescues Amanda from the villains. He throws a blow that mistakenly knocks out his teddy bear and breaks as close the door to your bedroom. Pell returns Wilhelm's comic book the next day and confesses that he's been reading it. Attacked by a stinging ant. When Wilhelm hears this, he jumps at the chance to assist Pell in his superhero endeavor, Voyage, leading him to his home where he stores comics, action figures, and other hero memorabilia. To begin, they must the nature of Pell's abilities, so they watch a film on ants. Regarding them, Pell is able to lift several times her own body weight because to the ant's incredible strength. He can bite through anything because to his very sharp mandibles that resemble those of an ant. Ants are quite good at sense of smell, and Wilhelm proves Pell has it by forcing him to do a test while blindfolded, putting his nose in a lot of different foods. While Pell knows that certain very rare ants have the ability to fly, collapses to the ground. Ants produce formic acid, which Pell uses to his advantage. Your own urine can now demolish things. Last but not least, the queen is the single most significant factor in a male ant's existence, detailing why Pell is so fixated with Amanda. Pell needs a cape and mask if he's ever going to become a superhero. Costume. They scrounge around the home for materials and attempt to make something, but they're hideous. So Wilhelm buys a bunch of outfits online and puts together an ensemble suit. Looks very fantastic, and it's not just the adjectives talking. After that, the young men hang around in the grocery store's parking lot, seeking out dishonesty. Pell's superhero identity causes contention. Eventually, they settle on Ant-Boy as a temporary solution after a slew of unsuccessful alternatives. Because of the lengthy delay, Pell is to the point that he needs food, and Wilhelm agrees to go out and get some. When he leaves, Pell sees a burglar take a woman's pocketbook and, after donning his disguise, he follows him. As so, he pursues the individual in question. The burglar sees Pell in his costume and laughs. As the robber gets closer, Pell recoils in horror and slams into a wall, but this doesn't deter him. If you try to stop him, he will just start to crawl on it subconsciously. Pell seizes the moment and pounces on the robber before he has a chance to escape. Moments Wilhelm comes back to the parking lot later, when he sees the police apprehending the thief and complains. Concern a frightening child. Pell, still in hiding, contacts Wilhelm to inform him of the situation. However, he fails miserably whenever he attempts to demonstrate his wall-climbing abilities. Even Pell is overcome with emotion. Pell is now again ravenous, and Wilhelm recalls that, like ants, he requires sugar to sustain his abilities. Idle down if he doesn't get some rest and refuel. Wilhelm dresses up Pell as Ant-Boy by giving her a belt, the ability to eat sweets whenever he needs a boost, a new case for his phone, and an earpiece he dubs the Ant-Com which Pell's phone can sync with, so they can keep in contact no matter where they travel. Adventures. From that point on, Pell uses Wilhelm's expertise to help him become a superhero in his spare time, rescuing victims of accidents, fires, and other catastrophes, as well as criminals can cause trouble for good kids at school. Amanda, who has never had a crush on anybody before, develops feelings for Ant-Boy after learning that the school play would be based on him. Pell is a huge fan of autographs, leading Wilhelm to have a one-on-one chat with him one day, justifying the notion that heroes shouldn't seek attention for themselves but rather use their abilities to serve others. Wilhelm feels Pell just cares about fame and popularity, and that females aren't interested in getting to know the genuine one. Amanda had been working on her assignment for the evening when she hears a commotion on the balcony. When Ida visits after work, she finds out that a supervillain known as the Flea has arrived to capture her. Amanda could only listen to her sister cry in vain. The Flea had already slung her over his shoulder and was speeding away. Just took the girl's jewelry and ran. Pell is disheartened to learn the next day at school that Amanda's illness prevented her sisters from attending. Cries of help erupt unexpectedly, disrupting the class. Pell sees a student ready to jump from the roof and dresses up as Ant-Boy to save the day. Ignores his mother's call into the Ant-Com and instead climbs the wall to rescue him. Pell ushers the youngster inside, only to find out he was carrying a toy equipped with a recording, put up by Ida to have her meet the infamous Ant-Boy. As to her sibling, she elaborates has been taken hostage, and the Flea has threatened to murder Amanda unless she gives him 48 hours of her life in a video message. Within 24 hours if Mr. Summers Ted does not pay $20 million and resign as CEO of Exopharm, Amanda is also in danger from him since he will harm her if the police are called. Pell is confused as to why Mr. Summers Ted is avoiding payment, and Ida explains that her family isn't very wealthy, so Pell agrees to pay to have Amanda rescued. Aid from Wilhelm. Ida has spontaneously decided to go along since they accidentally spoke her name. Support. 2. Pell is forced to take Ida to Wilhelm's house, despite the fact that Wilhelm despises having guests, because, in his opinion, females are careless and unable to maintain a secret. Ida cuts him off in the middle of his monologue. After becoming lost, Pell follows his nose to find Amanda throughout the city. Riding their bicycles about, the gang eventually arrives to Mrs. Gamelkra's home, the same spot Pell was last seen. Mrs. Gamelkra's unexpected death last summer has caused concern for Ida and Wilhelm. Pell refuses to let Aunt Boy be frightened outside, so she goes inside. Back in the room, he discovers a door that has been locked, but Pell manages to unlock it by urinating on it, which releases the acid that unlocks the door. In there, he learns he seems to be in a lab of sorts, down in the basement, surrounded by strange plants and insects. Towards the end, Pell discovers Amanda trapped behind a bulletproof glass enclosure. When he attempts to release her, the Flea arrives from behind and shoves him into the cage as well. As Pell inquires, Flea is happy to tell his tale. Once upon a time, he was a research scientist at Exofarm, uncommon kind of ants having special antibodies that may eliminate deadly illnesses. He used his mother as a test subject for a serum he created using the ant's healing properties. Pell saw the same man at the home where he was bitten, and now we know it was the Flea. Mrs. Gamelkra's tumors shrank after receiving the serum, but when Summers Ted performed his cuts, Mrs. Gamelkra was permitted to die, and Flea's investigation was halted. Thereafter, the Flea got to vengeance, and his studies shift focus from ants to blood-fed fleas. After ingesting the arthritis in his legs had been completely gone thanks to the Flea's new serum, and his legs were 100 times stronger. His appetite for blood increased as a side effect of the change. Therefore, his armor is stocked with 2 tanks to rest and restore your energy. Afterward, the Flea launches a series of psychological low blows at Pell, explaining that the ant that bit him was the last of its type and that he knows his true identity. Police sirens blaring, Wilhelm and Ida had phoned for help after losing touch and wanted to report it. Amanda and Pell are rescued by the police when the Flea uses his flying abilities to flee, the breaking of his spirit as a result of anything he has encountered. He agrees with the Flea that nobody really cares about Pell and he shouldn't put himself at danger for others who don't value him, to which Wilhelm replies. Pell tells him he can be Ant Boy and gives him the helmet, even though he insists they should go after the Flea together. Now on, because he's decided to go. Wilhelm examines the headpiece thoughtfully. Pell and Wilhelm choose to avoid each other the next day at school. Suddenly, an announcement interrupts the classes. Assault by the Flea, and the populace flees for the outside. When Wilhelm requests Ant Boy, Pell refuses, said he'll let the police handle it since it's none of his business. With 2 cans of pesticide in hand, Wilhelm dons the Ant Boy helmet and prepares to go after the Flea. As he proceeds down the hall, he discovers a girl hidden behind some shelves and successfully drives her out. But Wilhelm isn't fast enough to outrun the Flea. The girl runs outside and tells everyone that Ant Boy came to her rescue, and Pell has an epiphany. Wilhelm must be the one. Pell, concerned about his buddy, goes inside to check for him and discovers the outfit that was produced for the school's Ant Boy performance, which he dons in order to pursue the Flea. Takes Wilhelm's helmet off and knows he's been duped. Consequently, he decides to hold the youngster captive. Pell is eager to pitch in, but he's becoming hungry. Moreover, the sugar packs aren't included since this isn't his actual costume. Instinctively, the Flea, by knocking down more barriers and kicking Pell out of the room. As a result, Pell is in convenient proximity to a vending machine and is able to steal some coke, the liquid he uses to restore his strength. The Flea sees this and agrees to go with Wilhelm on a flying carpet. Hiding out in the woods, Ida attempts to give her assistance as Pell exits the house, but Pell assures her he doesn't need any. Okay, got it. Pell breaks into a bike store with his super teeth and rides off in the direction of, likewise, the woods. Pell comes in the jungle and discovers Wilhelm's spectacles lying on the floor. After being let free, he starts to hear the Flea's voice, reminding him that his true weakness is not sweets but rather his family. And then the Flea leaps off the tree and appeared in the middle of the lads, startling Wilhelm and causing Pell to flee. He contacts Pell to make sure he's okay. He's already thinking forward. Upon pursuing him, the Flea discovers the abandoned headgear and hat. In addition to the distant appearance of Pell, distracting him with insults and dares, Pell manages to, ready to engage in a one-on-one combat. The Flea opens his tanks to take a blood drink. Wilhelm goes up to the Flea from behind as Pell is keeping him preoccupied behind them and messes with the tanks to make them bleed out. Once Pell has finished recharging, the hero and villain rush each other in an attempt to end it all with a single punch, smashing the Flea into a tree and sending it flying. The Flea is helpless and his tanks are empty as a result. Once again, his arthritis is acting up. Pell explains that he failed because he had nobody to aid him when circumstances were tough, but the Flea kept trying, even after being cast away by him. Pell returns his glass to Wilhelm and there is a mending of fences between them. The cops eventually catch up with the Flea that night. TV announcers insist they are not at fault. Amanda is applying lipstick. Nonetheless, when he does show up, she attempts to thank him with a kiss, but Pell rejects her. on his knees and implores Ida to return the jewelry. With her feelings hurt, Amanda bolts from the room. In walks Ida, who reveals that she is aware of Aunt Boy's true identity but vows not to reveal it. Thanks to each other, after a while, Wilhelm goes to Pell with the suggestion that he wear a sidekick outfit. Pell thinks it's great. When he has Wilhelm and Ida on his side, he feels unstoppable.